This is a Fonzie Studio podcast. Welcome to Tales from the First Nations. I'm Jay Idle, and every week I'll share with you a tale and ancient wisdom of the native tribes of North America. I'll be joined by my cats, Dawa and Fonzie, who will undoubtedly make their presence known at some point, so I might as well just list them as co-hosts. We hope you'll enjoy the tales and wisdom, raise your vibration, and enrich your life with us every week. Welcome, friends. Welcome to the 30th episode of Tales from the First Nations. I'm your host, Jay Idle, and it's been an interesting morning. I made my coffee. All was good. I heard the coffee maker was done, so I went to pick up the pot, and I felt that it was not very full. And then I noticed that the water was still dripping. It turns out the filter inside had torn during the process, and all of the coffee grounds were loose. So they clogged up the thing so the water didn't flow down freely. So as I cleared it, it all went down nicely into my coffee pot here. But my coffee pot has, it's about, 84% coffee and the rest is grounds. Which, I don't know if you were thinking, I don't know if you're the kind of person who likes to invest in new ideas to start businesses and stuff. Maybe you have an entrepreneurial spirit. Crunchy coffee is not going to catch on. Don't put your money in that. If you were sitting there at a boardroom listening to a pitch with your earpods in, ignoring the guy, now's a good time to tell him to leave the room. Crunchy coffee is not going to work out. It's no good for anybody. But we're soldiering on because that's what Kokyangwuti would do. That's what she would want. And she is our topic today. This episode actually took a really wild turn from my intended episode. I had mentioned her, Kokyangwuti, spider grandmother. I had mentioned her a few episodes ago, her and the Hopi people. It was a great episode, and I decided I wanted to follow up on her a little bit more. She's a wonderful figure. She's credited with helping the Hopi people arrive here on Earth, teaching them what they needed to know. She's also a healer, which is great. She helps the sick. I really wanted to bring out these great things about her because however you look at it, she's a wonderful spirit that helps her people in many ways. She helped the god Tawa create the first humans. She protects her people with her web. She teaches her people how to live and care for one another. She's a healer. She initiates creative ventures. She's just wonderful. But I could only find one complete story, and it took a lot of work to find it, actually. So I was going to press forward with it, but in the story, she's kind of only a secondary character. In fact, she might be the reason that couples don't always get along. I decided to move on with it anyway because it was all I had. But then this magical thing happened. This little inner voice said, "Jay, are you sure you can't find another version of this story?" So I looked again and again, and I couldn't. But that voice was still there. So I thought, all right, I'll keep searching, and then bam. As you probably guessed from the title of this episode, I found it. So ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our very first 2-part episode. I feel like at episode 30, we've reached the big time. I will pause for a moment for you to give me a round of applause. Thank you for that. It really made my day. Anyway, so I plan to share them in the order that I found them. So one today and one next week. But before we begin, we have to talk about Kiva. About a Kiva, as it were. Among the modern Hopi and most Pueblo peoples, Kiva means it's a large circular room underground, and they used it for spiritual ceremonies. It was a place of worship. And it is in a Kiva that the goddesses in our stories live. The last character I'd like to introduce is Kokyangwuti. Her name is translated as Woman of Hard Substances. So she's the goddess of all common ornaments of wealth, like coral, turquoise, silver, shells. So this is her role. However, in the story I'm about to tell, this is where it gets complicated. There's a Kokyangwuti of the east and a Kokyangwuti of the west. So it makes it a little complicated. So to simplify, I'm going to just call them Goddess of the East and Goddess of the West. So hopefully that simplifies and you can follow along easily. Now, with all of that said, I offer you version 1 of the Hopi creation story. A very long time ago, there was nothing but water. In the east, a goddess, the deity of all hard substances, lived in the ocean. Her house was a kiva, like the kivas of the Hopi of today. To the ladder leading into the kiva were usually tied a skin of a gray fox and one of a yellow fox. Another goddess lived in the ocean in the west in a similar kiva, but her ladder was attached to a tortoise shell rattle. The sun also existed at that time. Shortly before rising in the east, the sun would dress up in the skin of the gray fox, whereupon it would begin to dawn, the so-called white dawn of the Hopi. After a little while, the sun would lay off the gray skin and put on the yellow fox skin, whereupon the bright dawn of the morning, the so-called yellow dawn of the Hopi, would appear. The sun would give rise, that is, emerge from an opening in the north end of the kiva in which the goddess lived. When arriving in the west again, the sun would announce his arrival by fastening the rattle on the point of the ladder beam, whereupon he would enter the kiva, pass through an opening in the north end of the kiva, and continue his course eastward under the water, and so on. By and by, these two deities caused some dry land to appear in the midst of the water, the waters receding eastward and westward. The sun, passing over this dry land, constantly took notice of the fact that no living being of any kind could be seen anywhere, and mentioned this fact to the two deities. So one time, the goddess of the west sent word through the sun to the goddess in the east to come over to her as she wanted to talk over this matter. The goddess of the east complied with this request and proceeded to the west over a rainbow. After consulting each other on this point, the two concluded that they would create a little bird. So the deity of the east made a wren of clay and covered it up with a piece of native cloth. Hereupon they sang a song over it, and after a little while the little bird showed signs of life. Uncovering it, a live bird came forth saying, "Why do you want me so quickly?" "Yes," they said, "we want you to fly all over this dry place and see whether you can find anything living." They thought that as the sun always passed over the middle of the earth, he might have failed to notice any living beings that might exist in the north or the south. So the little wren flew all over the earth, but upon its return reported that no living being existed anywhere. Tradition says, however, that by this time, Spider-Woman, Kokyangwuti, lived somewhere in the southwest at the edge of the water, also in a kiva, but this little bird had failed to notice. Hereupon, the deity of the west proceeded to make very many birds of different kinds and form, placing them again under the same cover under which the wren had been brought to life. They again sang a song over them. Presently, the birds began to move under the cover. The goddess removed the cover and found under it all kinds of birds and fowls. "Why do you want us so quickly?" the latter asked. "Yes, we want you to inhabit this world." Hereupon the two deities taught every kind of bird the sound it should make, and then the birds scattered out in all directions. Hereupon the goddess of the west made of clay all different kinds of animals, and they were brought to life in the same manner as the birds. They also asked the same question, "Why do you want us so quickly?" "We want you to inhabit this earth," was the reply given to them. Whereupon they were taught by their creators their different sounds or languages, after which they proceeded forth to inhabit the different parts of the earth. They now concluded that they would create man. The deity of the East made of clay first a woman and then a man, who were brought to life in exactly the same manner as the birds and animals before them. They asked the same question and were told that they should live upon this earth and they should understand everything. Hereupon the goddess of the East made 2 tablets of some hard substance, whether stone or clay, tradition does not say, and drew upon them with the wooden stick certain characters, handing these tablets to the newly created man and woman, who looked at them but did not know what they meant. So the deity of the East rubbed with the palm of her hands, first the palms of the woman and then the palms of the man, by which they were enlightened so that they understood the writing on the tablets. Hereupon the deities taught these 2 a language. After they had taught them the language, the goddess of the East took them out of the kiva and led them over a rainbow to her home in the East. Here they stayed 4 days, after which the goddess told them to go now and select for themselves a place and live there. The 2 proceeded, saying that they would travel around a while, and wherever they would find a good field, they would remain. Finding a nice place at last, they built a small, simple house, similar to the old houses of the Hopi. Soon the goddess of the West began to think of the matter again, and said to herself, "This is not the way yet that it should be. We are not done yet," and communicated her thoughts to the goddess of the East. By this time Spider-Woman had heard all about this matter, and she concluded to anticipate the others, and also created some beings. So she also made a man and woman of clay, covered them up, sang over them, and brought to life her handiwork. But these 2 proved to be Spaniards. She taught them the Spanish language, also giving them similar tablets and imparting knowledge to them by rubbing their hands in the same manner as the woman of the East had done with the white men. Hereupon she created 2 burrows, which she gave to the Spanish man and woman. The latter settled down close by. After this, Spider-Woman continued to create people in the same manner as she had created the Spaniards, always a man and a woman, giving a different language to each pair. But all at once she found that she had forgotten to create a woman for a certain man, and that is the reason why now there are always some single men. She continued the creating of people in the same manner, giving new languages as the pairs were formed. All at once she found that she had failed to create a man for a certain woman. In other words, it was found that there was one more woman than there were men. "Oh my," she said, "how is this?" And then, addressing the single woman, she said, "There is a single man somewhere who went away from here. You try to find him, and if he accepts you, you live with him. If not, both of you will have to remain single. You do the best you can about that." The 2 finally found each other, and the woman said, "Where shall we live?" The man answered, "Why, here, anywhere. We shall remain together." So he went to work and built a house for them in which they lived, but it did not take very long before they commenced to quarrel with each other. "I want to live alone here," the woman said. "I can prepare food for myself." "Yes, but who will get the wood for you? Who will work the fields?" the man said. "We had better remain together." They made up with each other, but peace did not last. They soon quarreled again, separated for a while, came together again, separated again, and so on. Had these people not lived in that way, all the other Hopi would now live in peace. But others learned it from them, and that is the reason why there are so many contentions between the men and their wives. these were the kind of people that Spider-Woman had created. The goddess of the West heard about this and commenced to meditate upon it. Soon she called the goddess from the East to come over to her, which she did. "I do not want to live here alone," the deity of the West said. "I also want some good people to live here." So she also created a number of other people, but always a man and a wife. They were created in the same manner as the deity of the East had created hers. They lived in the West. Only whenever the people that Spider-Woman had created came in contact with these good people, there was trouble. The people at that time led a nomadic life, living mostly on game. Wherever they found rabbits or antelope or deer, they would kill the game and eat it. This led to a good many contentions among the people. Finally, the woman in the West said to her people, "You remain here. I am going to live, after this, in the midst of the ocean in the West. When you want anything from me, you pray to me there." Her people regretted this very much, but she left them. The goddess of the East did exactly the same thing, and that is the reason why, at the present day, the places where these two live are never seen. Those Hopi who now want something from them deposit their prayer offerings in the village. When they say their wishes and prayers, they think of those two who live in the far distance, but of whom the Hopi believe that they still remember them. The Spanish were angry at the goddess, and two of them took their guns and proceeded to the abiding place of the deity. The Spaniards are very skillful, and they found a way to get there. When they arrived at the house of the goddess, she at once surmised what their intentions were. "You have come to kill me," she said. "Don't do that. Lay down your weapons, and I shall show you something. I'm not going to hurt you." They laid down their arms, whereupon she went to the rear end of the kiva and brought out a white lump, like a stone, and laid it before the two men, asking them to lift it up. One tried it, but could not lift it up, and what was worse, his hands adhered to the stone. The other man tried to assist him, but his hands also stuck to the stone, and thus they were both prisoners. Hereupon the goddess took the two guns and said, "These do not amount to anything," and then rubbed them between her hands to powder. She then said to them, "You people ought to live in peace with one another. You people of Spider-Woman know many things, and the people whom we have made also know many but different things. You ought not to quarrel about these things, but learn from one another. If one has or knows a good thing, he should exchange it with others for other good things that they know and have. If you will agree to this, I shall release you." They said they did, and that they would no longer try to kill the deity. Then the latter went out the rear end of the kiva, where she disappeared through an opening in the floor. From there, she exerted a secret influence upon the stone, thus releasing the two men. They departed, but the goddess did not fully trust them, thinking that they would return, but they never did. I don't know that this story makes Spider-Grandmother look particularly good, but I really admire the wisdom of the goddesses. We should share the best of what we have with others and allow the best that others have to be shared with us. It would create a more beautiful world for all of us. Now, of course, I shared this story to spotlight Spider-Grandmother, and the main takeaway from her was that she made life hard for couples. I guess everyone makes mistakes, but I'm going to share the creation story where she truly shines next week, so don't miss that. Thank you for joining me on my podcast and on my journey. I wish you well and look forward to sharing another story with you next week. Go in peace, return in peace, and may you be well. Today's story comes from The Traditions of the Hopi by H.R. Voth. For more great stories and legends, check out the Jaguar Bird channel on YouTube. There's a lot of wonderful content there. And of course, join me here next week for another story on Tales from the First Nations. I'm Jay Idle, and I will talk to you next time. Music is provided by my dear friend Scott Brocklesby. He wrote, composed, and created this beautiful song that you're listening to right now. And our podcast image of the moon was provided by Mark Lawton. We will see you next time. All right, that's it. How'd we do, Dawa?
Awesome.
Phones? Excellent. Then I'll share it.